She posed a profound question, asking if her companion understood their very presence in this world. For herself, awareness had simply arrived, finding her already existing within its embrace. Her initial inquiry, the first thought to truly surface, revolved around the inherent purpose of her birth. Every entity brought forth into this existence held a unique narrative, a personal saga. Calendarer, the sole dragon of despair, was destined to usher everything towards ultimate ruin. This profound destiny, this inherent calling, was the very essence of her creation, a divine mandate if one chose to perceive it as such. An irrepressible instinct, deeply ingrained within her being, compelled her with an intensity she found impossible to resist. It was this irresistible pull that ultimately dictated her choices. She mused on what this destined path, her inherent calling, might unfold for her, whether its outcome would be benevolent or malevolent. The scene then abruptly transitioned to a monstrous figure, who vehemently chastised Calendarer, demanding to know the reason for her actions. The monster's voice resonated with fury as she asserted their shared nature, proclaiming them all to be monsters. Calendarer readily acknowledged their collective monstrous essence in the presence of individual egos, much like her own. Yet, she reasoned that this shared identity did not preclude her from ending another's existence. With grim resolve, she commanded the monster to perish. Without hesitation, she activated her formidable despair bomb skill. The powerful blast erupted. But in a sudden flash, a girl intervened, shielding and saving the monster from the devastating impact. The girl inquired about the monster's well-being, her appearance seemingly a product of destiny's intricate design. Calendarer's gaze fell upon Florith, and she immediately branded her a hypocrite. It appeared that wherever Calendarer ventured, Florith inevitably materialized, obstructing her progress at every turn. Florith, recognizing Calendarer, noted that it was indeed her nemesis once more. Calendarer consistently thwarted her objectives. At first, it even felt as though their encounters were part of a meticulously pre-written narrative. Florith's persistence was remarkable, her constant interference undeniable. Florith explained her actions, stating she was merely fulfilling her responsibilities as a protector, yet Calendarer perceived this as an outright falsehood. Every dragon in this world, Calendarer believed, possessed an intrinsic destructive urge, and Florith, she thought, must be no different. Calendarer derided Florith, mocking her attempts to embody the role of a heroic dragon, or perhaps, Calendarer mused, it was simply an act of audacious shamelessness. Florith conceded that Calendarer's assertion regarding dragons being harbingers of destruction was accurate, and that indeed applied to her as well. However, Florith contended that instinct and ideals were fundamentally aligned, despite their seemingly contradictory appearances. This was, in truth, an astonishing reply, especially as Florith was actively pursuing an ideal that transcended her innate instincts. Furthermore, every aspect of Florith seemed novel and fresh to Calendarer. Thus, their time together unfolded for a considerable duration. Calendarer initiated her potent skill, the Sword of Evil, Glandut. Concurrently, Florith unleashed her own formidable ability, the Sword of Rage, Madrayer. Both glared intensely at each other. And the epic confrontation between them commenced. Calendarer knew, as had been the case countless times before, that their battle would simply not reach a definitive conclusion. Florith, too, concurred with Calendarer's observation. Calendarer then looked at Florith, posing a bewildered question about her current actions. She admitted her lack of comprehension but pressed Florith, questioning if her endeavors were so crucially important that they compelled her to defy her predetermined destiny. She repeatedly asked Florith the reason for her unwavering commitment. Florith responded that Calendarer was misdirecting her inquiry. Her current state was not merely a consequence of external influences. Instead, her chosen actions were what truly completed her essence. Her unwavering convictions and resilience, the intricate interplay of her instincts and ideals, even her demeanor and the very way she articulated her thoughts, all these elements coalesced to forge her true identity. That was the profound truth she articulated. She emphasized that the journey of self-construction began with these most fundamental elements. Calendarer, intrigued, then asked Florith what course of action she intended to take to fully realize herself. Florith candidly told Calendarer that she typically disregarded the opinions of others, which explained her disinterest in her own predetermined calling. She had transcended the conventional meaning of life bestowed upon her by this world and was in the process of imbuing her own existence with a novel significance. This realization initially made Calendarer feel as though her very existence was being invalidated. Yet, surprisingly, she found herself not rejecting Florith's perspective. Florith stated that if that was her inherent purpose, she would not deny it. Calendarer supposed that she was merely anticipating her own eventual conclusion, much as things stood in that very moment. Calendarer then challenged Florith, asking if her current stance didn't contradict her stated ideals. Florith contemplated, suggesting that perhaps when the inevitable moment arrived, they simply had to contend fiercely for the principles they championed. Calendarer offered a faint grin, and after a significant passage of time, an internal shift occurred within her. She gave birth to Ignis. Calendarer observed the newborn, questioning if this was indeed Florith's child. Florith chuckled softly, inviting Calendarer to truly observe Ignis, pointing out that the child possessed Calendarer's very own eyes. This revelation completely disarmed Calendarer. She found herself unable to engage in combat while cradling the infant. She then questioned Florith, asking who she truly was. Florith responded with a laugh, playfully asking Calendarer if she was feeling a touch of envy. Calendarer clarified, stating she was merely curious about the appearance of the father. Florith, however, concluded that Calendarer was indeed envious. From a dragon's perspective, the elapsed time was undeniably brief. Nevertheless, after witnessing Florith in that state, Calendarer's own instincts intensified, almost as if spurred by a competitive urge. Concurrently, a sense of something far more significant began to resonate within her. Numerous elements materialized around them, and Florith's child, Ignis, steadily matured. Calendarer realized that life had become considerably more bearable until she overheard a pivotal announcement from Florith. Florith was on the verge of conveying something crucial and inquired if there was another request for babysitting. Florith revealed that her family had garnered the attention of God, and to her knowledge, her own demise was imminent. Calendarer, incredulous, demanded to know what kind of grotesque jest this was. She observed Florith's silence, noting the grim seriousness etched upon her face. Shocked by her expression, Calendarer pressed her, asking if she was genuinely serious. Florith expressed her hope that Calendarer would ultimately achieve her deepest aspirations. She acknowledged Calendarer's efforts to suppress her destructive instincts. However, she emphasized that Calendarer was her cherished friend, and thus, she wished for her to live a life pursuing whatever she desired. Calendarer then asked Florith if she was aware that her child would perish by Calendarer's own hands, and Florith affirmed this grim fate. Florith requested that Calendarer show no leniency towards her child whenever they encountered each other in the future. She advised Calendarer to recognize that her children possessed far greater substance than she might imagine, even surpassing the potency of anyone she knew. Florith confessed her long-held desire to express her profound gratitude to Calendarer, the one who had acknowledged her very existence. Florith informed Calendarer that she would simply rest for a brief while. She asserted that if she were to be slain, she would pursue her killer relentlessly, regardless of any instructions given. She expressed her earnest hope that Calendarer would persist in her actions even after her own demise. She was certain that Calendarer would eventually encounter her children. Florith instructed Calendarer that when that time came, she wished for her to engage them in combat with every ounce of her strength, so that she might witness her children's unparalleled power. Returning to the present moment, Calendarer observed that everything had unfolded precisely as Florith had foretold. As Ignis appeared to have lost her grasp on sanity, Calendarer requested a favor from Palette. Palette continued to gaze at Calendarer, who then handed her the item belonging to Taphas. Calendarer informed Palette that she would now open the gate and implored her to ensure Ignis's safety. She desired Ignis's well-being because, at the conclusion of that path, an adversary awaited whom even her mother had been unable to vanquish. Yet, if Ignis truly was her mother's daughter, Calendarer was confident in her ability to succeed. With a faint smile, she speculated that she had once again been outmaneuvered by Florith. She felt an overwhelming longing for Florith. Essentially, the monsters were brought into this world with an inherent purpose. Calendarer discovered the worth of her life by embracing her instincts, whereas Florith found her meaning through her ideals. Yet, Calendarer contemplated that Florith must have concluded that the roles assigned at birth might not always be appropriate for individuals. This was the answer she sought regarding the world's purpose. And now, Calendarer chose to place her trust in Florith's daughter, Ignis, to uncover those profound truths. The world tree served as the definitive scale upon which the equilibrium of this entire world rested. Consequently, when the world tree succumbed to fire, this delicate balance was shattered. This cataclysmic event led to a substantial increase in the ferocity and power levels of all monsters, including the formidable eagle monsters. Eventually, this escalating situation garnered widespread attention across the world, prompting an official investigation. The inquiry revealed the existence of certain players who harbored extreme hostility towards the monsters. Simultaneously, other individuals had established organizations dedicated to protecting monsters and advocating for their equal treatment. These benevolent organizations subsequently formed guilds within the game to meticulously execute their charitable objectives. However, in the end, people consistently returned to the same fundamental query: the underlying reason for the game's initial creation. To this day, no one possesses the definitive answer to that enigmatic question. Somewhere within the vast demon world, the 12th prince of the West demon world, Pomra, exuded immense joy. He burst into laughter upon learning that someone had finally succeeded in destroying the world tree. He realized that all his elaborate preparations were at last complete. Consequently, he firmly believed that this world was now his for the taking. Unexpectedly, he was suddenly assailed from out of nowhere. A powerful blast erupted at his location. Harkmorph, who held the second rank, was the one responsible for the impactful strike. She challenged him, asking who had granted him permission to claim the world. Harkmorph struck him again, asserting his inherent weakness. She then smirked. Pulling up a digital screen directly before her, she mused that the entire endeavor was simply about accumulating the necessary points. Therefore, she concluded that she was now prepared to actively participate. She wondered if she truly anticipated the impending final battle. She pondered why the Dark Lord was presumed to be her sole target. She began to consider whether she should, once again, push her limits too far. Ignis finally managed to acquire Taphas's fourth vital item. However, in the process, she endured the devastating loss of something she held most dear, something she never wished to relinquish. This profound experience became the most traumatic memory etched within her existing consciousness, plunging her into a deep, panic-induced coma, leading her into a prolonged, restorative sleep. Ignis and Pallet stepped onto the designated spot, and the two of them were then transported back to the entrance via the portal. Yet, nothing remained there save for the indelible traces of a ferocious battle across most scenes, which were as brutal and scarred as a village ravaged by war. Lying amidst the devastation was a single feather, most likely belonging to the perpetrators. Who, in the entire world, could this mysterious adversary be? Pallet reminded Ignis that they had never learned the attacker's name. She confirmed with Ignis that they had indeed acquired it. Ignis simply ceased speaking after that. Or perhaps, it was more accurate to say that Ignis had lost the very capacity for speech. Pallet gently told Ignis that they needed to depart, as they had to locate their brother. Pallet took Ignis's hand, suggesting they embark on an adventure. It was only after suffering a loss that they truly comprehended its profound significance. Nevertheless, the only viable course of action was to continue moving forward, just as they had always done. For a significant period after their involvement at the World Tree concluded, she journeyed aimlessly with Ignis. She found herself utterly directionless, unsure of where to proceed or what steps to take next. She surmised that she lacked the inherent strength to accomplish anything independently. Still, she could not abandon her efforts just yet if she genuinely harbored the desire to effect meaningful change. Palette reassured Ignis that she would return shortly. Ignis remained silent, her gaze fixed on Palette. The scene then shifted to a temporary shelter designated for adventurers. Such convenient havens had been established across the globe. Apparently, despite their monstrous nature, they seamlessly integrated due to the abundance of available costumes within this game. They were expected to be entirely self-sufficient in this environment, including procuring their own sustenance. However, the monsters experienced no hunger, they had no need for food. Instead, they were diligently searching for specific medicinal herbs. She was uncertain if these herbs would prove effective, but she held on to the hope that they would provide some aid. Since then, this remained her singular focus. Palette consulted a book, pondering if this location was indeed the correct one. A particular flower within the book evoked memories of Olivia, bringing tears to her eyes. Palette resolved to remain strong, especially given Ignis's unwell state. She continued to pore over the book. Holding the herbs in her hand, she began to gather them. And after collecting a sufficient quantity, she realized they might be enough. Palette offered a greeting, and the shelter manager, George, inquired about her foraging activities, addressing her and her young adventurers. Palette presented her handbook, explaining that it had been of immense assistance. She was confident that her partner, too, would appreciate its utility. She thanked George, who expressed his pleasure at her words and hoped they would enjoy their stay. Small acts of kindness like this were profoundly valued during such trying times. They were fortunate that this particular location was not widely popular, as even without the need for food, they still required sleep. And though she felt lost and uncertain, she knew her paramount duty was to protect Ignis. This was a promise she had made to Olivia. Palette urged Ignis to try the medicinal herb soup, admitting that its taste was far from pleasant. She pressed Ignis, asking if she didn't agree that all medicine generally had an odd flavor. She then moved the spoon towards Ignis. Palette attempted to feed Ignis but observed that Ignis still found herself unable to consume anything. Utterly at a loss, Palette began to weep. She confessed to Ignis that she felt utterly helpless without her. She sensed herself losing something precious once more. Memories flooded back, the nameless golem who had saved her life, and her teammates with whom she had vowed to instigate genuine change. It felt as though these vital connections were slowly drifting away. Palette implored Ignis that if she were to lose her, she would never be able to regain her footing. She began pleading, desperately urging Ignis to awaken. Tears streamed down her face as she continued to cry, begging Ignis to regain consciousness. Murmurs rippled through the people outside the camp. George inquired of his people about the source of the commotion. An adventurer named Henny Jack informed George that a diminutive beast here had stolen from him. Henny vociferously shouted at the surrounding individuals, asserting that the creature was indeed a monster. In fact, he claimed, only monsters would commit such a deed, and he had forcibly seized a small, crying girl. The girl swore to God that she had no idea what he meant, vehemently denying ever stealing anything from anyone. Henny was convinced that intelligent players knew better than to pilfer from others, as the risks far outweighed the rewards. It was never cost-effective. He concluded that only foolish monsters would engage in such behavior. George asked Henny Jack why he couldn't calm himself for a moment. At that opportune moment, Palette entered the scene. She confronted Henny, questioning if he wasn't being overly harsh, especially since he hadn't actually witnessed her stealing anything. Henny retorted, asking Palette who she was, a mere monster daring to defend another monster. Palette defiantly demanded how he dared utter such words. Henny mockingly dismissed her. He turned his face away, telling her to forget the trivial matter, as the item in question wasn't worth much anyway. Palette hurled an insult at him. The young monster then looked at Palette and thanked her for intervening and saving her. She drew close to Palette, whispering into her ear that she had, in fact, stolen from him. Palette was utterly shocked by this admission. The monster confided in Palette that, regrettably, Henny had been correct. Perhaps he had suspected her due to his bullying demeanor. The monster advised Palette to always remember not to blindly believe everything she perceived. She then mockingly addressed Palette as Miss Clumsy Monster and departed. That was, without a doubt, a monster. Palette mused that perhaps many of their kind still lived in such a manner. She couldn't help but feel that saving the world might prove far more complex than she had initially anticipated. She noticed flyers affixed to a wall. Having not seen these before, she inquired of George if they were new. George informed her that these flyers had been posted worldwide but warned her that they advertised extremely dangerous propositions, strongly advising her against accepting them. Palette examined the flyer closely. She recognized the figure depicted as Harkmorph and wondered if this was indeed the second-ranked individual. She was utterly astonished to confirm that it was. George elaborated, stating that rumor had it Harkmorph herself had put up the posters. The posters declared that if someone defeated her at a specific time and location, she would grant them anything they desired. Palette asked George if Harkmorph was intentionally provoking them. George explained that Harkmorph typically proposed light sparring before the main battle, but no one had ever managed to overcome even that initial challenge. He reiterated his warning, urging her to steer clear of such a perilous endeavor. However, Palette knew that she had to fight to rescue her brother, Taffas. An opportunity like this might never present itself again. She resolved that she must go. George admitted that since there were so few challengers, the nature of Harkmorph's tests remained largely unknown. But one thing was certain, no one had ever emerged victorious against her. Furthermore, Harkmorph had meticulously provided the location and precise coordinates. Given that it was situated far from the Anaxis, it was likely somewhere near the demon world. Palette began to ponder if she could reach that distant location while accompanying Ignis. The very presence of an ego made a substantial difference. That was how this world had been designed. She had acquired the ego of hope, but she knew it was insufficient. She questioned if her abilities would be enough to shield Ignis from yet another formidable adversary. She concluded that she had no choice but to undertake this mission. She then wondered how she would ever manage such a remote journey. Suddenly, she overheard a male voice commending her impressive act of assisting the weak. The individual was Ria, the leader of PM, who inquired if he might offer his assistance, should she be amenable. Palette, wary, asked him to identify himself and explain his reasons for wanting to help her. He offered a reassuring smile, telling her there was no need for apprehension. He stated that his sole motivation was his enjoyment of helping others. Palette was surprised by his straightforwardness. He then abruptly remembered a detail he had omitted earlier, his own introduction. He decided to provide it immediately, stating he was Ria, the leader of PM. Palette pointed out that he had neglected to mention an important detail, namely, what PM actually stood for. He realized he probably should have started there. He informed Palette that PM was the abbreviated form of protecting monsters, and that was precisely their mission. Palette was astonished to learn that a human group dedicated to safeguarding monsters actually existed. She then questioned him, asking if he was aware that she herself was a monster. He responded that he had been impressed by her actions earlier and simply wished to extend his help. He explained that this was merely one of the things he did, so she had no cause for alarm. As ego monsters, they had become a significant topic among humans, making them highly prized trophies exchanged at exorbitant prices. Under such precarious circumstances, she was uncertain whether to trust humans or not. Nevertheless, she decided to accept his assistance, informing him of her willingness to receive his help. She wasn't sure if the second-ranked individual, like Nandemic, would be friendly towards monsters. She realized she had no time to waste wandering around aimlessly. She thought it would be better to seize this chance while she had it. Ria smiled warmly at her. He commended her decision and instructed her to bring her friend along. He assured her that he would transport them to the location closest to their destination. She resolved to retrieve her friend, stepping towards Ignis and taking her hand. She informed Ria that she was ready. George observed the distinctive cape Ignis was wearing. Ria told Palette that she had done an excellent job by bringing Ignis along, and with that, he instantly teleported them. He utilized consumable items, which were portable and facilitated high-level teleportation. Palette held Ignis' hand as a sudden, blinding flash enveloped them. Ria expressed his hope that they would both enjoy their adventure. Palette smiled, silently wishing Ignis not to worry, for she recalled that it was Ignis who had taught her never to surrender. Therefore, there was no way she would abandon her. They both successfully teleported. Ria then recalled seeing a person on one of those posters wearing a similar cape. He mused that there were, indeed, many red capes circulating. He wondered what might have transpired if she had been that particular individual. All he knew for certain was that she would ultimately have to choose between two opposing sides, the world of humans and the world of monsters. He understood that she would inevitably face a crucial decision, and he was aware that this was how events would ultimately unfold. After what felt like an interminable journey through the disorienting teleportation portal, they finally reached their intended destination, the field of black plains. Palette perceived the atmosphere as suffocating and wondered if this was indeed the demon world. A wave of nervousness washed over her. She suddenly paused for a moment. Her gaze fixed on something before her, and she wondered if this was the second-ranked individual. The second-ranked person was seated in a chair. She asked Palette who she was, questioning if she was the next challenger. Palette was certain that this was the individual depicted on the poster. Harkmorph greeted her, inquiring if Palette was truly the one who wished to challenge her. She observed them, concluding that they appeared quite weak in her presence. Palette knew she would never be able to defeat her alone, nor was she foolish enough to attempt it. Harkmorph had posted those flyers to accumulate points for the ultimate quest, assuming the challengers weren't worth many points, and if things unfolded favorably as they had with Nandemic. Palette approached Harkmorph, asking what she thought about discussing their situation. Harkmorph agreed to listen to whatever Palette wished to convey. After that, Palette recounted Ignis' story to her and explained her need for the item. Palette also detailed the adventures they had endured. Upon hearing Palette's narrative, Harkmorph concluded that it was undeniably an unfortunate tale. She informed Palette that she did possess the item in question and had not even attempted to upgrade it. Palette asked if Harkmorph could simply give her the item, and Harkmorph agreed. However, she also made it clear that anyone desiring the item must successfully complete her test. Thus, if Ignis wished for the item, she would have to pass the test on her own. Harkmorph revealed that the test was arm wrestling. Palette did not comprehend the meaning of arm wrestling. Harkmorph, for Palette's information, stated that she was left-handed. Harkmorph grinned. And Palette began to worry about Ignis, who was expected to arm wrestle her with her left hand. But Palette feared that Ignis was currently unable to use her left arm. She asked Harkmorph if they could acquire the item through a different test. Harkmorph expressed sympathy for Palette but stated she could not provide the item without the designated test. She refused to grant the reward based solely on a story whose veracity she could not confirm. Palette realized that Harkmorph was being reasonable. They could not ask a stranger for such charity, as it was a matter of trust. However, she also knew that Ignis was in no condition to perform any task, let alone pass the test. She began to strategize a way to persuade Harkmorph to give them the item. One positive development was that Harkmorph, the second-ranked individual, was not overtly hostile towards them. She understood that they simply needed to devise a method to pass the test. She knew that if only Ignis would awaken. Harkmorph then made a startling suggestion to Palette: she could always bring Olivia back to life. Palette was utterly shocked by this revelation. She questioned Harkmorph, asking if such a feat was truly possible. Harkmorph affirmed her query. Harkmorph informed her that a hidden dungeon lay deep within the demon world, where one could exchange anything to resurrect someone. Regular players and monsters simply respawned upon death within the game. Only pets in exceptional cases were eligible for this specific exchange. However, since the risks within this dungeon far outweighed the potential rewards, visitors were a rarity, though not for this particular team. The three of them entered the dungeon. Palette asked Harkmorph if she was certain she wished to accompany them. Harkmorph smiled, telling Palette that she had nothing better to do before the ultimate battle. She thought it was a good idea to occasionally raid a hidden dungeon. Palette realized that, much like Nandemic, not every human being was inherently malicious. Harkmorph informed Palette that this particular dungeon was renowned for its extreme difficulty, but she quickly reassured her that there was no need to worry. Her eyes began to flash ominously. She declared to Palette that she could eliminate anyone who dared obstruct their path. Palette felt a sudden chill. She believed that the sheer murderous intent emanating from Harkmorph's eyes was enough to induce suffocation. Therefore, it was no wonder that she held the second rank. Palette was immensely relieved that Harkmorph was being kind to her. Harkmorph, eager to proceed, told Palette that they should begin moving forward without delay. They traversed the extensive dungeon and finally located the elusive place they sought. Palette observed what appeared to be the two doors of the hopeless exchange. She asked Harkmorph, seeing the two distinct doors, which one they should choose. Harkmorph informed her that the first door was the door of hardship, precisely as its name implied. Behind it awaited a challenge that would endure for several hours. She further explained that it involved an unknown battle against a hidden boss. Palette learned that this dungeon was quite similar to the World Tree dungeon. A shortcut that could replace a more protracted challenge would inevitably present far greater difficulty. Harkmorph told Palette that there was one crucial detail she needed to remember. Harkmorph would only accompany her as far as the process leading up to the transaction itself. She unequivocally clarified to Palette that after that point, Palette would have to proceed alone, as Harkmorph had no intention of assisting a coward who could not act independently. Palette assured her that she was well aware of this and required no further reminders. Harkmorph grinned after hearing Palette's firm response. She thought that now was the opportune moment for some excitement. She slid open the door, revealing a transaction agent named Karanti standing within. He observed their arrival and, addressing them, declared that because they had chosen to evade their hardships, they would undoubtedly regret their presence. He labeled them challengers and instructed them to approach him. Harkmorph told Palette and Ignis to step aside for a moment. She mused that if she had an entire Zero Guild accompanying her, it would be effortless to eliminate him. However, she believed that raiding a boss alone was far more intricate than they might perceive. She then activated her unlimited form change. The system promptly displayed a notification: Harkmorph, ranked second, had initiated the boss battle. The scene then transitioned to some unknown characters, and one of them inquired of another if he was certain that people would come searching for such a meager price. The individual asked Rush if he didn't think they should increase the offer. Rush sternly silenced him, asserting that the money was hard-earned, and they would not spend a single coin more than this. They had located a witness in a temporary shelter. A teleportation portal was involved, which would allow them to track their targets from that point. He then hurled his sword at Ignis's poster, declaring their imminent arrival for her. Karanti warned them to brace themselves, as they would have to pay a price for their presence here. Harkmorph laughed, telling Karanti that she was already eagerly anticipating the confrontation. Palette realized that the very atmosphere here was shaking her to her core. Their palpable intent to kill permeated her senses, seeping into her bones through her skill. She understood that if Harkmorph emerged victorious, she could indeed resurrect Olivia. She comprehended that this fight represented her sole opportunity to bring Olivia back to life. Harkmorph glared at Karanti, a smirk playing on her lips. Without a moment's hesitation, she surged towards Karanti. She activated her rage/skill. The ground beneath them began to rumble violently. Karanti, calling her incredibly arrogant, challenged her to come and face the trial she deserved. He then activated his orb of destruction. Harkmorph observed that her rage passed through him as if he were made of air. She knew that immunity to physical attacks was a formidable challenge. So Karanti extended his hand towards Harkmorph, commanding her to return to ashes. As soon as he moved his hand in her direction, a massive explosion occurred. Harkmorph was confident in her ability to evade his attacks, even considering them slow. She activated the skill warrior senses, and a warning window appeared on her screen. she was informed that the curse of the unknown permeated this area. Through her senses, she could discern the enemy's skills or the nature of the threat she faced. Although the information was fragmented, this sense functioned like a radar for imminent danger. At that moment, she only knew that physical attacks were ineffective against him. However, she believed she didn't need to worry, as her awakened form offered a unique ability. She leaped towards Karanti, who swiftly blocked Harkmorph's assault. Palette observed both of them engaged in a furious battle. The sheer concentration of mana alone caused the earth to tremor. The resulting shockwave was powerful enough to completely engulf her. Harkmorph and Karanti stared intensely at each other. Karanti was consumed with anger, while Harkmorph's face was flushed with her own escalating rage. Karanti delivered a direct hit to Harkmorph, who clenched her hand. The object Karanti had thrown towards Harkmorph exploded with a booming sound. Harkmorph smirked, eyeing Karanti. Karanti unleashed his ultimate skill, the Big Bang attack, which detonated with a thunderous explosion. Harkmorph activated her warrior's protection. She realized that this skill appeared to be a curse specifically applied to mana, and then she recalled a simple method to counteract it. She resolved to obliterate all traces of the ground. Boss monsters typically adhere to specific routines. However, when a routine was disrupted, they were compelled to employ their killer skill. He activated the unknown skill. And Harkmorph smiled. After observing him, amidst an explosion, she began to fracture the ground. Another notification materialized on the screen, detailing the tenacity of the Berserker, a function that allowed one to survive a lethal attack with just one hit point remaining. One of the most exceptional features offered by her unlimited form was now perfectly primed for use. The lower a Berserker's hit points, the more explosive the statistical boost they received. The lower a Berserker's hit points, the more explosive the statistical boost they received. However, this power did not come without limitations. A crucial factor determining this limit was the amount of damage sustained within a specific time frame. Greater damage in a shorter period, implying a higher risk, resulted in a lower limit. Consequently, being struck by a killer skill and entering a near-death state with a single devastating blow reduced the limit to its absolute minimum. She understood that her unlimited form transcended all such constraints. She decided to concentrate all the damage she intended to inflict onto a single, precise point. With an immense flash of power, she struck Karanti. The .0 skill was activated. The entire area turned crimson, devoid of any signs of survival. The ground continued to rumble. Palette continued to observe them with a sense of awe. She realized, without a doubt, that Harkmorph was truly the second-ranked individual. Karanti informed her that she had successfully passed her trial, and Palette saw that their plan had indeed worked. She concluded that Karanti must be the one capable of bringing Olivia back to life. She told Karanti that she wished to revive an ego monster named Olivia, the flower slime. She then inquired about the price they had to pay. Karanti remembered the ego monster she was referring to, Olivia, the flower slime. He informed Palette that her soul would be inextricably linked to the resurrected entity. If one of them perished, the other would also automatically die. Palette was astonished to hear about the concept of a linked soul, where the demise of one automatically led to the death of the other. Karanti then requested an item that belonged to the deceased monster. They had managed to defeat the hidden monster with the aid of the second-ranked individual. However, she suddenly realized that she possessed no items belonging to Olivia. Olivia had been an ego monster, and thus, she had simply vanished upon death before she could leave anything behind. Palette had nothing that belonged to her. Karanti then told Palette that she seemed to have an item belonging to a deceased ego monster. He pointed towards the object the golem had given her. Palette was shocked to see him indicating that specific item. Karanti looked at Palette's surprised face and confirmed that her guess was correct. He asked her why she hadn't brought that monster back to life. Palette realized that Karanti was suggesting she revive the golem instead of Olivia. She felt utterly lost, pondering how she could ever judge which of their lives held more significance. Palette clenched her hand, and for a brief moment, allowed herself to imagine. She envisioned him being here, in the real world, where they could forge genuine memories, not confined to that place where she would never be permitted to meet him again until her own death. She imagined reaching out for his hand once more. Tears began to stream down her face as she pictured all these scenarios in her mind. She thought about the unknown golem, recalling the name he had bestowed upon her. His precious name had been given to her by him. She spoke her own name, Palette, and expressed her enduring regret at never being able to give him one in return, as she had promised when he was still present. Palette began to wipe her face, knowing that they simply could not. She was certain that he wouldn't wish for her to resurrect him instead of another ego monster. Harkmorph observed the crying monster before her, wondering if it meant she possessed a heart. Palette recalled that the golem had always urged her to live the life he himself had desired. She was determined to live up to her chosen name, Palette. She reaffirmed her identity, reminding herself, I am Palette. With a renewed sense of purpose, she made her decision regarding who to revive. She informed Karanti that her intention was to bring Olivia back to life. Karanti instructed Palette to hand over Olivia's item if she wished for a resurrection. Palette began to search her memory for any item Olivia might have left behind. She knew she possessed none, nor did Ignis. After a period of concentrated thought, she sensed something. At that precise moment, Rush materialized, his gaze sweeping over numerous faces he hadn't seen in a considerable while. He launched an attack at Palette from a distance, but Palette swiftly evaded his strike. Karanti, in a blur of motion, snatched Rush's weapon. Rush grinned, having eagerly anticipated this day for a long time. He greeted Ignis, mockingly referring to her as a scumbag. Palette stared at him, unsure if he would pursue them further. She perceived his overwhelming aura, prompting her to wonder about this man's identity. The individuals accompanying Rush began to advance toward Ignis and Palette, effectively surrounding them both. Rush then addressed Harkmorph, stating he was aware of her presence but surprised to find her playing house with a monster. Harkmorph assured Rush that he needn't worry, as she had no intention of interfering whatsoever. She clarified that this was the initial promise she had made to these monsters. Rush, in turn, made it clear that if Harkmorph wished to return in one piece, it would be prudent for her not to interrupt him. Harkmorph concluded that such an arrogant attitude was quite typical for a thieving lowlife like him. They both exchanged intense stares. Regardless, Rush told her she could think whatever she pleased, as long as she didn't disturb him. Kangwoo asked Rush to explain what was wrong with this particular monster. He questioned Rush if he was certain that she was the same monster they had encountered previously, noting that there was something distinctly different about her. He admitted to a nagging sense of unease. As he was about to strike Ignis, Palette cried out, vehemently demanding that they keep their hands off Ignis. She realized that this was precisely what Harkmorph had alluded to, the part of their journey she had to conquer on her own, no matter the cost. Rush stepped closer to Palette, asking her what she would be like if she were a monster. He then questioned whether she and Ignis harbored intentions of transforming the world. He informed Palette that one crucial element was missing from her understanding. He sternly reminded her that they were, and would forever remain, monsters. Palette stared at him, urging him to cease speaking in such a manner. She asserted that he wouldn't be able to voice such opinions if he himself were a monster. Rush acknowledged her desire for him to momentarily experience her perspective. He then turned the question back to her, asking if she had attempted to do the same for humans. He explained that the game existed solely because of its users, implying that she was merely a product enjoyed by consumers. He elaborated on the diverse human experience, those for whom video games were their sole solace, those who used games to unwind after a demanding workday, those who played with family and friends, and even those who earned a living through gaming. Humans, he declared, were the fundamental reason for the existence of video games. Rush asked Palette if she was attempting to negate the very origin and purpose of this world's existence. Palette realized that his words held an undeniable truth. They could not deny this fundamental reality, for it was the very reason monsters had come into being. Rush stated that if she denied the purpose of their existence, he could guarantee that humans would never accept her in this world. Palette gritted her teeth, insisting that she denied nothing. The overwhelming hostility permeated her defenseless state. She wondered what course of action to take, trembling uncontrollably. Rush declared that she would never succeed, branding them all as selfish, whining collections of beasts. Palette's rage ignited. She furiously told him to shut up. Rush observed Palette's fierce expression, realizing she simply didn't comprehend. He slashed Palette with his sword, sending her crashing to the ground. Rush advanced toward Ignis, telling her that she would never change anything. With a devilish smile, he asked Ignis if he was correct. Palette, disoriented, wondered what had just happened. She had been trying to protect Ignis, yet she had fallen. Rush laughed, telling Ignis that her beloved monster had just died and asking where her fiery ego had vanished. Ignis listened silently, offering no reply. Rush then told Ignis that, unlike game players, ego monsters became extinct the moment they died. He asked her if she intended to stand there and allow him to proceed. He activated his legendary weapon, the Dark Moon. He mused that after all the effort he had spent searching for her, he hadn't expected to find her in such a state. He believed he had merely wasted his time seeing her. He gripped his sword tightly and swung it towards Ignis, bidding her farewell. As he was about to strike Ignis, Palette, still lying on the ground, suddenly grabbed his leg, huffing with exertion. Rush turned his face toward Palette. Palette pleaded with him not to harm Ignis. Rush observed that her ego had not yet faded. Rush told Palette that the problem with her type of ego monsters was their inability to grasp that it wasn't a matter of giving up or not. He asserted that it was never about how much they tried, but rather how effectively they performed. He taunted her, asking if she was whining about how much effort she had exerted. He warned her that if monsters couldn't overcome their pathetic excuses, they would all soon face extinction. He began to move towards her, but before he could act, she activated the ego skill of Blackrock. This skill, derived from the golem himself, had been enhanced by her during her past adventures. It created a prison cell, ironically possessing the most formidable defense imaginable. She was confident that he wouldn't be able to break free so easily. Now that she understood their location, she realized she needed to leave immediately. Rush was confined within the prison she had erected. She urged Ignis that they had to escape. However, Rush shattered the penitentiary. He challenged her, asking if she truly believed she could hold him down. Palette watched in shock as Rush broke through it with such speed. Rush then changed his mind, deciding to torture her as much as he could until she perished. Currently, they lacked Olivia's item, leaving them with no hope of escaping this devastating predicament. Rush began to advance towards Palette. Palette knew that something catastrophic would occur if she used her skill again. Rush violently struck Palette's face, causing her to scream. The impact of Rush's blow triggered an explosion, shaking the entire area. Palette mustered all her remaining energy to rise once more. She reassured Ignis not to worry, promising to protect her with every fiber of her being. She realized that her wound was far more severe than she had initially thought. She knew she would soon lose consciousness, so she gritted her teeth. A dazzling, flashing light enveloped the area. Palette clung tightly to Ignis. Rush attacked her again. He stretched out his hands, directing multiple devastating attacks towards her. Palette clenched her teeth, refusing to let go of Ignis for even a moment. Rush slashed her again, and blood began to drip. Palette was severely injured, drenched in her own blood. She desperately begged Ignis to awaken, reminding her that they had nowhere else to flee. She recalled teaching Ignis to run away, asking if she remembered this lesson as she spoke. She offered a helpless smile, telling Ignis that she desperately needed her strength. Rush looked at her, asking if her emotional drama was finally over. He taunted her, urging her to prepare, as it was time to get deleted. The scene then shifted to where Ignis found herself in a space composed of nothing but pure white. She wondered where in the world she was. and Angelus unexpectedly materialized there. He remarked on the scene she had created, and Ignis recognized him. Angelus explained that this was the crack between all data. It appeared to be the first time anyone had entered this space. He informed her that ego monsters typically passed directly through this stage and became extinct. He surmised that she truly was one of the exceptional ones. Ignis told him that ever since Olivia had died, she felt as though she had been intermittently entering and exiting this space. Angelus perceived this as a disconnect between her mind and body, attributing it to the penalty of her ego of sadness. He urged her to cease mourning and depart from this place, identifying it as a rest area. Angelus was about to leave when Ignis suddenly grabbed his shirt. She implored him to explain what had happened to her. He questioned Ignis if she was prepared to confront the truth. Ignis affirmed, telling him to reveal whatever awaited her. Angelus, acknowledging her insistence, decided to show her everything, to uncover this cheap masquerade for her once and for all. Angelus instructed her to place all the items she had collected onto the ground. Ignis complied, placing the items before her. Angelus then guided her to sit down in front of the items, telling her to close her eyes and focus her mind on a single point. He reminded her that she had experienced this sensation before, urging her to try and recall what it felt like. Ignis began to remember the feeling. She knew she had certainly done something similar in Cynthia's castle. Questions had arisen then, such as why she was trying to save her brother. She had no recollection of her family, let alone her brother. She suspected she must have forgotten something significant. Key clues were then presented to her through a series of flashbacks. The system displayed a warning: she did not have permission to view the unprotected file. The system then asked if she truly wished to continue viewing. Ignis confirmed, telling the system to allow her to view the file. A flash of light emanated from the collected items. She saw her brother, Taphas, as she journeyed back into the past. She found herself in an unfamiliar place. She moved her hand, which simply passed through an object. Realizing she was merely an observer here, she began to step forward. Lush greenery enveloped the entire area. On a rainy day, she continued onward, wondering why she felt a sense of longing. She entered a house where no one was present. Suddenly, she noticed a wall where her name and Taphas's name were inscribed. Ignis wondered who could possibly live in such a place. She heard footsteps behind her, and her mother appeared. Ignis's mother remarked that she had returned sooner than expected, warmly welcoming Ignis. Ignis absorbed all the sights of her past. Although she was invisible, no one could perceive her. Her mother and Taphas's mother beckoned Ignis to come, stating that Taphas was waiting for her. Her mother began to step inside, and Ignis followed. Ignis realized this was her mother. She looked around, wondering where Taphas was. Somehow, this mysterious place filled her with a sense of nostalgia. She decided to follow the two for a while. Ignis's mother, along with her, reached a particular location. The young Ignis told her mother that she had thought it was raining outside. She observed that the place they had just arrived from was bathed in sunshine, surrounded by vibrant greenery. She told her mother that this place was incredibly mysterious. And her mother explained that it was perpetually sunny due to a system error. It was these minor glitches, her mother asserted, that rendered things precious. She asked Ignis if she didn't share the same sentiment. Ignis then saw her brother, Taphas, who greeted the old Ignis. Ignis, upon seeing them, became certain that this was her family. Suddenly, she questioned herself, why wouldn't she give up on returning to this place? She felt utterly exhausted, and another error notification appeared. It stated that the file had not been found, and the system informed her that it was loading the next file. Taphas's memories began to blur. Ignis cried out, not wanting Taphas to disappear from her. At this critical moment, the memory disk was on the verge of cracking when she suddenly witnessed Ignis's past version who had been stabbed. The old Ignis had shielded Taphas. And the present Ignis gazed at the scene, wondering if this was a part of her forgotten past. Blood dripped from the old Ignis's face. She asked her brother Tafas if he was unharmed. Tafas was also covered in blood. The unknown ego monster rescuer, who had been active since the beta period, asked the other rescuer if he was responsible for this. The ego monster rescuer asked them how much longer this would take, questioning if 10 minutes was sufficient. The ego monster rescuer noted that the target was already deceased, implying it wouldn't be much fun. The ego monster rescuer noted that the target was already deceased, implying it wouldn't be much fun. He guessed that this encounter would take less than 10 minutes. The old Ignis looked back at him. The name of the ego monster rescuer was Flames. The old Ignis asked Flames if he was human. Flames didn't even bother to respond. He simply informed them that the raid time had arrived. The old Ignis was enraged. She wondered how a mere human dared to inflict such a heinous act upon her. Without a moment's hesitation, she leaped towards Flames, intending to kill him. Flames smiled. He asked Ignis if she was ready to fight him. At that very moment, she experienced something extraordinary. She felt something tampering with her soul. She knew that her attacks never missed. She activated her rage slash. Flames stared at the old Ignis. Ignis continued to look at him, having no idea who this human was. She knew that his skills kept her off balance, but she was certain she had to defeat him for her brother. She activated the dragon's second ego, accompanied by a sudden blast. Fire engulfed the area. Flames displayed a devilish smile. He saw that this was the true enjoyment of the game. He didn't engage much with his guild. He could raid dungeons alone, but they consistently yielded the same reward. However, things would be different if he defeated a powerful ego monster like her. He believed it would be easy, given her current state. He set a timer for 10 minutes, and a screen popped up displaying the countdown. Flames enabled the maximum reward level. He stood against the boss-ranked Ignis. The Ignis within her memories, upon seeing Flames, realized that he was the leader of number 0. She wondered if she had fought him before. However, she knew she had no recollection of it. She was sure that some memories would return at the conclusion of this, along with evidence leading to her brother. The timer displayed the remaining time. Flames attacked the old Ignis. Both of their weapons clashed, and both were engaged in a fierce battle. Their faces contorted with rage. The screen showed only 5 minutes and 41 seconds remaining. A sudden blast occurred. Flames looked at Ignis, who was gathering her powers. Flames ran toward Ignis, who launched a direct attack at him. The reddish flash emanating from Ignis's attacks was incredibly sharp. The present Ignis stood there, observing the fight between the old Ignis and Flames. Suddenly, after witnessing that skill, she realized that both the old Ignis and Flames were growing weary from the prolonged battle. Ignis wondered what had just transpired. She had no idea why she couldn't move her body. As he stepped toward the old Ignis, Flames informed her that in the library, skills and weapon stats were reduced to 1/5 of their original power, but he believed that would be sufficient to kill her. He created a weapon specifically to end her. He warned her that her game was now over. The shock delivered by these past scenes began to stir some of Ignis's forgotten memories. She recalled that she had been killed by that human on that very day. The 10 minutes expired, and the old Ignis was indeed killed by Flames. Ignis didn't remember much after that, though it was merely a shadow of the past. Yet, she understood the profound meaning of that memory. The 2 stars, which marked the beginning and end of everything, had fallen from the sky that night. Ignis opened her eyes before Angelus, and told him she understood everything that had happened to her. She knew he had saved her that day, and although she still didn't fully know who he was, she now perceived that he was not her enemy. Ignis requested permission to leave. Angelus informed her that an ego item served as a connection between this world and the other. He told her that since she wasn't dead yet, that item would be enough to bring her back. Ignis asked if that meant using Tafas's items wouldn't work. Angelus reiterated that, as he had said before, she wasn't dead, merely unconscious. He clarified that Tafas's items would therefore not awaken her from her slumber. By mentioning the ego item, Ignis asked him if he meant what she suspected. Suddenly, a flash occurred. Ignis smiled upon seeing it, knowing it would appear. She opened her palm, revealing the keychain resembling Olivia, which Olivia herself had given her. Ignis regained consciousness and thanked Palette for taking care of her all this time. Rush witnessed Ignis's awakening. Ignis looked at Rush as if seeing him after a long absence. Palette was overjoyed that Ignis was back, having thought she would never awaken.